Hi everyone, welcome to this podcast on how to find private housing in London. This podcast is aimed at current UCL students, but also prospective students. If you're not here in UCL, but you're thinking about maybe living in private rentals, this podcast is definitely for you. And honestly, anybody who would like to listen. My name is Amelia Olsen. I'm a Strategy and Experience Manager in UCL Campus Experience and Infrastructure. But you're not just hearing from staff today. We've also got two of our lovely students here to give their experiences around finding private housing. We've got George and Erik. So I think, George, if we start with you, if you just tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm George. I'm in my third year. I'm studying medicine.
And whereabouts in London do you live, George?
I live in King's Cross area and I live with two other people.
Nice. Okay. And then we've also got Erik.
Hi, students. I'm Erik. I am currently at my second year of undergraduate in UCL, studying the course of History, Politics, and Economics. About my private house, I currently live around Baker Street with three of my roommates.
Lovely. And Erik, where are you from?
I come from China.
Nice. Okay. So I think if you're both ready, we can just get straight into it. So actually for our listeners and viewers, today we're going to approach this in the kind of chronological order of how you might go about finding private housing. So we're going to go right from when you're thinking about it and kind of thinking about who you might even live with, all the way through to when you move out. But yeah, let's go back to the kind of the very beginning of when you're starting to think about where you might live after you've lived in halls, or potentially you're coming straight to coming to UCL and going to move straight into a private rental. What types of things do you need to consider when you're thinking about who to live with? Thoughts?
So, I mean, for me, I first had to think about schedules and thinking about, say, when I have classes, how early they are, because that would determine how far away I want to live, because then I can wake up later. It's pretty much more ideal. And then also thinking about things like cleanliness. So when I was looking for a house, I was trying to visualize what would be my perfect living environment. And I thought clean was like right up there. And I lived with the two people that I live with now previously. So I knew what they were like. I knew their habits, and I felt like it would fit in with my future.
Well, that's a whole different story for me. Actually, I have two different stories. So I have two different experiences into different private housing. One is with someone that I have already known for a little bit while. I met with her like online, and I choose her as kind of my roommate because we kind of fit in. I don't know, we both share the same budget. Not only the budget for rent, but also the budget for example, the living fees or something like that. So we could shop together. We could go shopping together, and also she's friendly. She sounds responsible, and in terms of she's responsible, and she is the very best roommate I've ever had. Well, but another different story is about the private house I started last September. I actually go to an agency. So that means I haven't met any of my roommates before I move into the private house, so I don't know them.
Oh, okay. Is that where you're living now?
Yeah.
Okay. How's it going?
I think it turns out fine, because I think, of course, people will say that know your roommates beforehand is good, so that you could have, for example, a lot of things in common. But I think it's still theoretical. You need to actually live with someone to know what that be like. So I think communication would matters a lot in a long-term, like sustainable roommate relationships.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. I'm sort of similar to you, Erik. I've lived with really close friends. I've lived with people that I kind of know fairly well, and then at the moment I'm actually living with a couple of people who are friends of friends, and it's worked out really nicely. We all get on. We've got kind of similar vibes, and they're really nice and clean,
Nice.
which is very helpful. You brought up an interesting point there around budgets, and kind of aligning some of those budgets and talking about budgets. How have you both approached the budget conversation with flatmates?
I think for me, a good starting point is looking at how big someone might want their room to be, because that's obviously quite indicative of how much you're going to pay. And especially if you're in student accommodation now, think about what rooms people are living in now and see if they want to live in a similar size room, because that could also suggest they're willing to pay a certain amount. So for example, in my first year, I lived in like a large single room and it was way too big, and I definitely did not want to pay for that in a private rental, whereas my current flatmates lived in very small rooms, but they were more willing to increase the size, and so that was a good way to sort of curb the awkward conversation, because it can be quite difficult to discuss budgets as it's quite a personal thing, of course.
How about you, Erik?
Like I said, different stories. So firstly, during my first private house experience, we kind of have this conversation and agreed on this kind of budget. So we need to decide whether we want like our private bathroom or not. So bathroom and kitchen really matters. And because even though it's the like same bedroom, whether you have your private bathroom or your kitchen, that would change the price a lot. So eventually we agreed to share a bathroom, so we could actually cut the budget a little bit, you know. So about my experience with the agent, we don't need to discuss the budgets with my roommates, my flatmates, future flatmates. So the only thing you need to do about budget is talk to your agency. What kind of room do you want? And how much would you like to pay for it?
Nice and simple.
Yeah.
You mentioned there, so talking about like your overall budget as a flat and how that can kind of change a little bit depending on what you're looking at, and also what the market's doing to some extent. Obviously, house prices in the UK are going up.
Shocking.
London rents are going up. There's not much that we can do about that, but that does mean that kind of people are having to think a bit about what their budgets are going to be and kind of grow them a little bit year on year. Within the flat itself, obviously there's often different sizes of room, like you mentioned, George, or one room might have an ensuite whereas the others share a bathroom. How have you typically gone about deciding who's going to pay what, and what are those conversations like? Because I'm fairly sure that lots of our audience might be a little bit nervous about having those conversations, and what we want to do is help you get past those nerves. George?
So I think, like I said before, seeing what types of rooms they have already is a good starting point, seeing how they found it. So for me, I was just too much room. I wanted a small room, and I said that from the start. And you can sort of detach that from the cost. So you can just say, I want a small room. And that can be like a way to not say, I want to pay less.
But when it gets to having the conversation, so like if you're going round, you're doing the viewings, and we'll come on to viewings in a little bit. But when it comes to like, okay, I'm going to have the smaller room, here's the main overall rent price, because generally speaking, they don't break it into different rooms if you're looking as a kind of as a group. How have you approached going, well, I'm going to pay £15 a week less?
Yeah. So it's actually quite a funny story. So we were given the floor plan and it had like the measurements, and I sat down with my mum and basically we worked out like the total area and tried to divide like the cost of each space by obviously how big the room is. And we did it like very literally by how many meters squared.
You used maths.
We used maths. Yeah, it's quite smart, I will say. But yeah, and then I sent it into the chat and I said, oh, this is one way to work it out, or potentially like different other ways. And we had a discussion about it on like a phone call, because none of us were in London at the time. And it made most sense to just stick to the facts, as that way no one could technically disagree. Yeah.
Erik?
for me, I just realized how lucky I am because I have never have the, I haven't need to, have that kind of
conversation.
experience or have that kind of
Haven't got
conversation.
your mom involved.
Yeah. I like I said, during my second experience, I just talked to my agent, and for the first one, we actually have like very identical room and a private bathroom, so it's okay. So it's 50-50.
Oh, nice.
Hmm.
You see, you've both done this in such a smart way. I feel like...
What was it like for you?
When I definitely remember at one point just kind of... I don't think we plucked the figures out of thin air. We did it the easy way by doing it in multiples of 5. So we rounded up some of those things. And it was like, okay, well, £15 a week to you, £15 a week to you. And that worked. I think it is important to... One piece of advice I might give to the students listening is that having a conversation about it is way better than just thinking about it on your own in your own head, or feeling kind of difficult about it, or feeling hard done by if you're not there for the conversation. I think it's much better to actually talk to your friends or future roommates about it. I think that's the way to go. Being fairly
communications.
Communication is key. Okay, so we've thought a little bit about kind of our flatmates, and then we've almost jumped ahead to like, how are we going to decide who pays what and how we approach budgets. Let's think about the actual process of flat hunting, and I think this is often the bit that everyone goes,
Oh God, yeah.
And also, London is very different to other parts of the UK and other countries in terms of how the housing market moves and how quickly it moves. Why don't we start with Erik this time? When did you start looking?
So I started looking around, I would say 4 months earlier. So it's like May. But obviously it's too early. Yeah, so I was recommended to try that again during June and July, so like 2 or 3 months before the tenant actually start.
Okay. George?
So the original plan was around May as well. I think most people choose around 3 to 4 months before. It doesn't mean you're necessarily going to find the place, but I think it ended up being June, because the issue is as well, around this time, some people go on holidays, and then there's this whole thing with, okay, who's going to go? Are we in the same time zones? Can we like call you whilst we go and do the viewing?
Who's going to do the viewing?
Yeah.
Who do you trust to do the viewing?
Yes. Do you trust their opinion? That's the big thing. But around like June time actually was when we started doing them.
That is something to factor in actually when, and like you said, George, not everyone's going to be in the country. Some people are international students, they might head home. Some people go get like jobs or they head home. There's all sorts of reasons you might not be in London for the summer. So yeah, maybe marking out some time for when you can do it.
It's interesting because I was actually in London for the whole summer vacation. So that's where I actually have my first private house with my roommate, because it's only 3 months, but I still have to find a place to live.
Okay, so that was like a short term.
Yeah, short term.
Nice. Okay.
But even though I was in London for all the summer vacation time, I still it still took long enough for me to decide where I want to live. I think I haven't decided yet until August.
Okay, yeah. I think my advice to students is often at least have done some thinking in term 3. So don't leave it till the summer to even start thinking about housing. I think it's often worth at least like doing something like watching this podcast or listening to this podcast, so that you can have a bit of an idea of, okay, this is how the process is going to work, and you can be a bit prepared for it. I think I started like looking at Rightmove and things just out of curiosity to be like, ooh, what's out there? Am I going to get to live in a palace? No. Pretty early. But actually that brings us on to another question. Where do you look, and how do you find a property? So there's lots of websites. I've just mentioned Rightmove. Can you guys think of any more?
So there's also Zoopla, which is another big one. I think Rightmove and Zoopla are what most people were doing. We found our property on Rightmove. Zoopla didn't work out as well, but but yeah, no, mainly those two apps. But there's also something that UCL does, which is like alternative accommodation, which, Erik, did you have something as well to add to that?
Oh, yeah. There is actually some support that UCL provides called, well, just Google it, Google UCL Alternative Accommodation, and there is going to be a website about finding some private housing out of student accommodation in London. So generally they provide, for example, one of the part is from Student Union. So they got this kind of platform. You could communicate with current UCL students. So you could probably find some good informations, like what kind of locations is good for UCL students. Also, you probably gonna find some, I don't know, potential roommates or something like that. Also, there are just contacts. You could call, you could email to find out more information.
Yeah, it's a really good. Thank you for that signpost on behalf of Campus Experience. It's a really good point. There is a whole web page called Alternative Accommodation for Students on the UCL Accommodation website, which is it's basically lots of links out to other places where you can find guidance. It's also got some links there to the University of London Housing Service. They've actually got a platform where landlords can kind of list housing and houses and flats. So that's another place to find private housing. There are also lots of private accommodation providers, so purpose-built student accommodation in London. Those you tend to need to start booking quite a lot earlier. So we're finding that in term 2, they're quite often starting to get booked up. So if you're thinking, yeah, I really like the halls experience, I want to do that again, and you want to live in a private student hall, start now. There are other ways of doing it. So Erik mentioned through the SU, there's some like links. They've got an advice service. They've also got platforms for where you can meet other students and meet potential flatmates. Some other things like that are what's it called? What's the one where spare room? That's the one.
Spare room, yeah.
Spare room. So if you're looking on your own, spare room is quite often a good one because that's often like houses that are already set up and you can kind of join in there. That is obviously a little bit different to going and doing it all as like a group, and there's lots of advice on like how to stay safe if you're using spare room. There's also things like open rent. Open rent's another one of these places where landlords can list. Landlords can actually list directly on open rent, so that's another one where like proceed with caution. Sometimes it can be really good to have a lettings agency to go through. It's just that little bit more safe. One thing that actually no one's mentioned yet but was a really big one, and I think is still quite a big one, is word of mouth, where you'll get students who might be moving. That maybe you've got some students from your society who are in like final year and they've decided they're going to go and live somewhere else, or they're no longer going to be in London, or basically they're giving up their flat. And they'll go, we've got a really nice 3-bed that we're paying X amount for. Is anybody looking for a 3-bed? Because quite often if you do it that way and you avoid the landlord having to put it on the market through a lettings agency, they avoid getting some fees, and so you might not get as high a sort of rent increase.
Oh, actually, I want to mention that one of the very important sources nowadays for people to know properties is actually social media. So, for example, whether it is, Facebook or any kind of social media, or for a lot of Chinese students, WeChat groups, you got a lot of information about like the place that some students want somebody to take over. Yeah, and other kind of stuff. Also, you can meet a lot of agency at that kind of platforms. It's kind of, I don't know, advertising thing or something like that.
George, I'm going to come to you for this one. When you're doing that search, if you've got, for example, one person who's in the country, another one who isn't, or another one who's like off on holiday and having a nice time, and so there's one person doing that search.
Yeah.
How do you keep things fair?
I think the important thing is to constantly say, if you have a group chat with these people, you can come up with a fun name and you can constantly share what you've been finding out. And I think it's really important that once you start looking, make that May, June time when people are still at uni, so that you can maybe start looking at properties together, just so you can see what the work is like actually involved. And I think depends how long it takes you to find a place. So for instance, in my situation, we were still looking about a month, 2 months in, and my friends had come back from holiday by then. So then I was like, okay, it's your time to like pick up all this mess. So yeah, I think it's really important to constantly update a group chat or something like that. And also say if like someone puts in more work finding the place, you can then make them put in the work like later down the line. Make them...
But the other ones you mean, not them again.
Make them pay for the toiletries.
I know that the way that I've done it in the past is if one person has done all of the viewings and all of the searching and done all that work, they get to choose their room.
Oh, smart as well,
That's quite a nice one. So rather than making everybody else just buy them toiletries. It's an interesting route, George.
No, to be fair, that's what we did. So I actually went to the viewing for the place that we live in now, and I even took the day off work to go. So yeah, I had the number one choice of room. So yeah.
Nice. I think it's a good way of doing it.
Yeah.
Erik, you're obviously through an agency at the moment. Was that an agency here in London?
Yes.
Okay, can you tell us a bit about that?
It's a London-based agency. So I actually tried a lot of apps we talked about before, like I used Spare Rooms, I used, what is it called, Zoopla, and Operant also, but I don't know, I was just not lucky. I was just unlucky, so I haven't found a good place for me until I think, August. So I just went to an agency. So I met my agent and tell them what I need, what's my budget, and of course I told them, I need to live near UCL so I can go to campus. And they actually find some, I think it's 2 or 3 pretty good places that I could choose. But I'm not saying like everybody should go to the agent. It's good for students to try to find out the best place by yourself. But I think if you are already in the August, you haven't found any good place yet, you could, the agent is always an option.
Yeah. No, cool. Thanks very much for sharing. You mentioned there being near to campus was something that you were kind of quite keen on. The big question. What do I need to consider about where I'm going to live? What are the different factors that come into that kind of thought process?
I think, for one, obviously location, so how close. And then I think as well, think about the facilities nearby. So where's your nearest supermarket? Or what is your nearest supermarket? So for me, the nearest one is Waitrose, which is just not student friendly at all. So that wasn't great. But yeah, thinking about that, or say like there's a gym or general like green space as well. So where's your nearest park? Because you don't always want to just be held up in some big flat looking at buildings all the time, do you? Some of those things.
It's a really good point. I know that green space is one of the big ones and has always been for me. And I actually was quite keen not to live right next to UCL after my first year. I was like, I want to go further away. I want to get the bus. Partly to be a little bit closer to, some parks and things like that. Although, Zone 1 does have quite a lot of parks. But also the big one was rent prices, and
Definitely.
depending on which location you're in, those vary. Erik, how about you? What were you thinking about?
Location of course matters the most. So I think there are 2 important things about have the right location. Firstly is of course how you want to go to campus and how you want to go to other places. So you have to think about what kind of transport you want to use. Okay, I'm gonna say this, but public transportation in London is, I would say, kind of expensive. But
I really wondered what you were going to say then, Eric. I was
in
worried you were
agreement.
about to say London public transport is anything other than like so good, because you can get everywhere. But you're right. Particularly if you're getting the tube,
tube
it starts to get expensive.
Yeah. It's good. You can get everywhere you want, but it costs you. So for me, I wanna save a little bit. So I choose to walk to campus. That means I have to live in some place that it won't take like 1 hour, 2 hours for me to walk to campus. And the second about location is actually safety. So you want to say whether this place is actually safe. So there is many ways to find out whether a place is safe. You could talk to somebody that is who knows London very well, or you could search online, of course.
I think that's a really important point in finding somewhere that you're comfortable with. It's quite nice to live somewhere where there are other UCL students around.
Yes.
There's lots and lots of, so this is actually here's some nice niche info for everybody. Actually, it's quite interesting. We've seen a bit of a pattern for students moving further east over the past couple of years, partly because we have the new UCL East campus that's now open. But also, I think even before then, there was a little bit more of a move east. But that kind of northern central block of like Camden, Archway, Finsbury Park, Islington, those sorts of areas, they are super popular with UCL students. King's Cross, Pentonville, all of those areas. There's quite often at least sort of a couple of other students around.
I think as well, the types of properties that there are in that area. So say if you want to live in a house where you want to live with more people, realistically, if you want a more affordable place that's a bit further out, you're going to find houses like that. Or if you're happy with a flat, like I'm in, so I'm zone 1, so I'm quite central, and it's much more common to find a flat there than a house. Way more affordable as well.
That's a good point. If you've got a flatmate who's super keen on gardening,
yes,
zone 1 might not be for you.
No.
Eric, any thoughts on that?
If you want to live in an apartment, so you will have neighbors, so must be considerate about whether you think you could handle the potential arguments with your neighbors. So if you think, no, I don't want to have like annoying neighbors, no, so choose a house. I don't know. That's
a good point.
A lot of potential things actually.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so we've thought a little bit about the kind of the pre-planning, and then when we think like, oh, where am I going to go? The time has come. We're going to do some flat viewings. Ooh. How do these work? What are they like? What are some things that you should do when you're on a flat viewing?
Well, first off, when you're looking at flats online, typically they'll have information, say the floor plan, which I mentioned earlier. They'll have photos of the property, and they'll also have the name of the estate agent or say the landlord that is organising the viewings for the property. And they'll have a phone number below. So when I was using Zoopla and Rightmove, they always had the phone number, which you then had to ring them up, or an email address. And you'd say, oh, I'd like to view this property. When can I come? And either it will be like a big block of viewings where, say, you go there, there's about 10 other groups. I had that once. That was not very nice. Or they'll be very nice and just let you guys go as one group and show you around themselves. So yeah, that's how you find it.
In terms of phone versus email, what do you find works best?
If you want to get a viewing fast, you're going to need to phone them. Emails, they're just not going to be checking them. I think at the start, I was emailing them because I did not want to have to ring them up. I'd never done it before. I was so shy. I was like, oh, sorry.
And they just didn't reply.
Yeah, they just don't reply. And especially if they say like ring at this time, ring in the morning, do it. Because there was one time where we were looking for a property, actually going into my third year, and you had to phone them by 10 a.m. the next day because they were shutting their office. And I phoned them at 10:30, and they're like, "Oh, sorry, all the like viewings have gone now." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me? Only half an hour?" But yeah, so do what they say.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I think when you're first starting talking to estate agents, it can be a little bit like, this is so weird. I wasn't expecting this. Because you ring them up and they're like, "Oh, well, that property's not there, but we have this other one that, no, it's not online yet. There's no photos of it, but we can take you there. The address is here. How does that sound?" And you're like, okay.
Yeah, you will never know what kind of things they will tell you.
Exactly. I think going in with a fairly open mind, obviously keeping your sort of thoughts on, is this safe? Is this a scam? Am I doing the right thing? Like, definitely double check and chat to someone and ask someone who's done it before, maybe. But it is really normal for estate agents to go, or you'll be at a viewing and they'll be like, "Okay, actually this one someone's literally just put an offer down, but I can take you over here to this one." That's quite normal.
That happened to me as well.
But getting on the phone, it is something we all have to learn.
It takes guts. It takes guts, I'm telling you.
Well, hopefully everyone will be okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's something on like finding a viewing or booking one. Now, what are we doing when we're at the viewing? Any guidance?
Well, like we said, agents. So if you some kind of estate agents take you to a property, it's possible that there will still be some of the tenants before that were gonna get contact with you.
Oh, yeah.
So you can actually have a chat with them. Like, what was that like? Is it good to live in that place? Is the agent responsible? Is the landlord friendly or something like that? Is the neighbors friendly? They probably not gonna tell you all the details, but yeah.
Big wide eyes and eyebrow wiggling, like, it's great.
Yeah,
that's such a good point, Erik. Like, there's a person there, or there's almost always someone in their pajamas when you go on a viewing, and you can ask them questions. I guess some other things that, here's the kind of the official things that University of London Housing Advice Service would suggest that you do. Test that water pressure. Like, you might feel a bit weird going and putting the shower on in someone's house, but it's good to do. Like, check, does it work? Then things like mold, having a look at the windows, like, is there any mold? Hopefully not. External walls, in corridors, in places where it feels a bit cold or damp. It's a really good thing to kind of know about. If there is mold, if there are any problems, actually, that's one of the things that you can do when you're kind of first signing onto a property. You can say, like, I will sign this contract. I would like you to fix this, 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 and this before I do. Or that kind of stuff can be built into the agreement. We'll talk more about negotiation in a bit. But then windows, are they double glazed? Does the house feel warm? Single glazing is going to cost you a lot more over the winter. Like, you're not paying for the windows, but because energy escapes through them, those heating bills might go up. And some London properties are great and are super insulated, and some London properties are not. Victorian terraces, we are looking at you. Are there any signs of like rodents or pests? And then what furniture is included? That's a really big one. Quite often you'll go to a viewing and there won't be any desks, or there might be like, yes, there's beds and there's like wardrobes, but there might not be a kitchen table, that kind of thing. And again, that's the sort of thing you can agree with your landlord. So I know on my last property that I signed for, because everyone works from home a little bit now, there were no desks, and we were like, we will all need desks. And they went, really? Yes. But it was fine, and they agreed and they bought the desks for us, so that worked quite nicely. Have you guys ever been to viewings where it's like fully furnished versus part furnished? George?
Yeah, I think also when you go to viewings, the current tenants are also living there at the moment, which we mentioned, but that means that the furniture they have will be there. So you need to make sure that whenever you're at the viewing, be like, oh, so is this included, or is this just something that they've brought along to make it look nicer? So the ones I've gone to where they are fully furnished, like, I mean, for me, I was looking for fully furnished. You don't have to buy loads of, like, I don't know, sofas or tables when I was going to flats. That's too much to carry around when you're moving around London. and you have to look at like how much damage has been made to them already, and also consider, even if it is undamaged, you'll need to make sure that you don't damage it throughout your tenancy, because otherwise they will know. They will take photos of that inventory check and they will pull you up on it.
Yeah.
And also, like, to come back to just other things we're checking, like carpet and wooden floors, like that's a big thing, because quite often the carpets will have stains. And I know that one viewing I went to, there was this huge, like, I'm not sure what it was. Apparently, like, somebody dropped an iron on the carpet and there was like an iron shaped like discoloration. And I was like to the estate agent, well, what's going to be done about this? And he said about a professional clean that was going to happen. But I think we can maybe discuss this later. But when an estate agent mentions professional clean, I mean, there is a big variation in the terms of standards, I will say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. I think that the old professional clean, yeah, we'll come on to
Very
it in a
ambiguous.
bit. But I think the other thing is that there will be some things that the landlords and letting agents might just not fix, because then it's usually when it's kind of something really surface level or sort of aesthetic. But then you'll sometimes get it where you go, oh, these carpets aren't that nice, and they're like, well, we'll put new ones in, and it turns out that they've kind of planned to do that all along. It's always a little bit tricky.
Yeah.
Every agent is different, and again, when we talk about, and every property is different, when we talk about negotiation, we'll talk about the intricacies of how you actually sort all of this stuff out.
Yeah.
A couple of other things that, just before we move on, some more guidance from the University of London Housing Advice Service. They actually have a downloadable checklist for when you go around on a viewing. So yeah, print it off or have it on your phone and go around and, have I checked the toilet flush? I have now. And then another thing is kind of avoiding pressure tactics. I think they've got some tips on avoiding pressure tactics from lettings agents. It's sales ultimately, and they will do the 17 million people are looking at this property right now. I've got them on the phone. And you don't always have to give in to that. They are gonna, like, the agencies will use some tactics, and you can push back a little bit, and if it doesn't happen, then it doesn't happen, and you don't get that property, but there might be another one, because, well, there will be another one. Just out of interest, before we move on, how many viewings did you guys do?
Well, I would say at least 6.
At least 6, okay.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I could probably win 2 hands, maybe over. Yeah, I went to a few.
More than 10, okay.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's a real range. I'm pretty sure I've only ever done like 4, but I'm very lazy. And there's other people who I know who've done kind of, they've been to lots and lots of viewings. And then there was one particular year where it was the kind of end of COVID, and everyone was returning to London all at the same time, and people were, it was sort of auctioneering style stuff. But that seems to have dropped off a little bit, hopefully. But yeah, it can be anything between, like, I don't know, 4 and upwards of 15. Hopefully not 15.
Yeah, hopefully not.
Hopefully, I think 6 is a good number, Eric.
Yeah.
I think that's a nice one. Okay, I'm gonna ask you guys about negotiating now. So you've done your viewing. Did you sort of say, yes, that's the price, we'll offer you the asking price? Have you ever negotiated?
I haven't negotiated about the actual price though, but I did try to negotiate about, firstly, the time period of the tenancy, like how long, and how should I pay? Like, should I pay it like once, or should I pay like every 6 months? It's better to pay every 6 months. And of course, it's about bills as well. So what kind of bills would you include it? And what kind of bills do we need to pay for ourselves? So that's a lot of things you could probably negotiate with your tenants or the landlords.
Yeah, that's a really good point, especially if you're moving in with a bunch of people who you don't know. Doing the bills through the landlord might be easier. George, ever done some successful negotiation?
So I think I've had 2 flats I've one nearly secured, was about to, then it fell through at the last minute, and then this current flat, which I managed to negotiate successfully. The first time round, we did actually do the like asking price, which I'm finding less and less is the way to go. I think there's still a mix. Some people can buy the property or rent the property for the price that they actually ask for. But for instance, the flat I have now was actually listed relatively much cheaper than every other flat in the market. So then we could go way above the asking price. And quite often is what they'll say is like, oh, we have another viewing on this day. You need to make up your mind by that day.
Yeah.
Or as well, they might even sometimes tell you what it's currently being offered at, and what are the types of offers. So how high are they going above, or like if they are even going above, for instance. And I know that when we secured the current flat, we did, like I said, have to go way over. But we also mentioned about how we need to make sure that it is fully furnished, because one of the rooms was being converted from a living room into a bedroom, which is very common.
The classic.
Yeah.
Very common in London flats. So yeah, we had to make sure that that was going to have all the furniture it needed to make it a bedroom. So yeah,
some negotiation in there, George. Definitely.
Yeah.
I've actually successfully negotiated down, which is I've done it a couple of times.
Really?
Yeah. I think just being slightly brazen, to be honest. And so I know that back in like second year, I mean it wasn't very much. I think I got like £50 a month off. But it was one of those where they kind of did we've got viewings booked in for tomorrow and Friday and that kind of thing. And you can almost use that as a negotiation tactic yourself. And if you say like, well, I'm here and right now I will give you this price and I'll sign it now. And that's one way of kind of doing it. I think I did that time. And then the other one, I think it was genuinely because it's the flat that I now live in. I was just like, well, there'll be other flats. I don't really care about this one. Let's go in under asking. And then it was like, I think £100 a month. So not like loads, but a little bit.
Yeah, it's success.
Yeah, I know. Well done, me.
Yeah, and to jump in there as well. So going into my third year, we decided to stay in the same place. And then we had to negotiate because often they will try and increase the price.
Absolutely.
And they are going to throw out some crazy figure and expect you just to go along with it because you want to stay there. But no, you shouldn't do that. And what we did was we looked at other houses on the market. And I think because they tried to justify increasing the price of rent due to inflation. But it might be just because my mum works in finance, but she like worked out all the interest rates and compared it to how much they were going to increase it by. And we once again used maths to our advantage. And we like showed them that this is just too much and there are other places and we can go look for them, which is like you said, there's going to be somewhere else out there for you, even if it just takes a little while longer. I think they're just being greedy sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point on if you're re-signing a contract, you've definitely got negotiation kind of
for sure.
power there in a way. This is in some ways it might be your first foray into sort of businessy type things as a student. You might enjoy it. Okay, so now let's talk contracts. So you've done your viewing. You've decided it's happening. You've agreed something in writing. Make sure it's in writing. Make sure it's in an email. So the offer, that is. You've probably paid a holding deposit, which is basically okay. We want this. We want this property. It's normally like a week's rent. And then the lettings agent will take it off the market for you. And then that's when the paperwork begins. They'll send you a contract. What is the first thing that you should do?
Well,
Erik, there is only one correct answer to this.
Read it.
Yay! Got the answer. Yes, read the contract in full. Yes, it's long. Yes, it's a little bit boring. You must read it all the way through. George, talk to me about contracts.
I think when you're reading it, you need to make sure that you know the exact dates for everything and also say their particular requirements. So they might have a no pets policy, for example, and you might want a flat pet. You might want a flat cat, flat dog. Well, that's just not going to work.
I think this is unusual as students.
Honestly,
but you know, fine.
It is, but somebody I know did have a cat that they took in, which was quite cute, but I wouldn't do it. But yeah, no, so look at that, and then also say like the dates, so when you'll be moving in, because often like it could be slightly different to what they said, or you might need it to be earlier because university is starting earlier, or you have like another commitment popping up. And also just checking like your own details, like making sure they've got your name, your address, the guarantors, right?
It's a very good point. There are often, even on dates, I mean, there's sometimes some wiggle room with dates and like deciding exactly when the contract will start. It's another thing you can negotiate on. But yeah, there's often just typos. Like, just straight up typos in there. And then there might be weird little clauses on, for instance, like keeping the garden maintained. And you're like, but there isn't a garden. And so just kind of confirming some of those details, because it's often just like a stock contract that they use for all of their properties. If you don't understand bits of your contract, do you know where you can get help?
So I know the University of London, they have a service where they can check contracts for you. I'm not too sure what the particular name is.
I think it's the University of London Housing Advice Contract Checking Service.
Well, okay. Wordy, but it says what it is on the tin.
Does what it says on the tin, I think, and that's free, which is really, that's kind of, and they're experts, and it's very much on a case-by-case basis. So particularly for international students, if you've never sort of read an English contract before, although, I mean, plenty of UK students also won't have read an English contract before. That's a really good thing to use. The SU service, advice service, can also help out with contract checking if you need to do some of that, like just double checking stuff, or if there's really, really weird stuff in there that you need a bit of professional advice on. Erik, any other thoughts on that? Or
yeah, I think there's still some very important sections you want to pay attention in your contracts. So firstly, of course, it's about money. So it's not only about rent, it's about how you should pay the rent. Like I said before, 6 months or all the rent at once. And also about maintenance and your responsibility and the landlord's responsibility. So there will probably be specified like what kind of damage could be covered by the landlord, what kind of damage you have to pay, and also I guess like we mentioned before, the professional cleaning. You probably gonna have to pay for the professional cleaning when you move out. That's another topic.
It's a good point. I'm going to come back to your point about rent in a second and paying rent. But on the maintenance point, most of the time, if stuff breaks during your tenancy, the landlord pays for it. Like if you have smashed a window because you've been a bit silly and kicked a football at it, then you might be might be charged with it. But most of the time, so like my washing machine broke recently, like the door just stopped working. And the landlord fixed it. If taps stop working, if plumbing stops working, most of the time it's the landlord's responsibility to fix that stuff. But if you've done it through kind of being a bit reckless yourself, that's when you might be asked to pay. Rent and paying. So Erik, you're an international student. So the 6 months rent and the kind of year's rent up front, those are the sort, that is, unfortunately, as an international student, you're much more likely to be asked to pay rent that way. George, I'm guessing you pay your rent monthly?
Yeah, because I'm a home student, so because I have UK-based guarantors, that's why I'm able to pay it monthly.
So guarantors, it's an interesting one. Erik, did you ever get the option to have a guarantor? Or
I have a guarantor in UK, but the problem is I haven't got that kind of option. They just asked me, okay, you pay 12 months. At that time. And also it reminds me of that break clause.
Yes.
Yeah. That's one important thing, and I didn't have the option as well. There is no break clause in my contract. I don't know. So I don't know a lot about break clause. How about you?
Do you want me to talk about break clauses,
You
George?
go for it, and I'll jump in.
George gave me that real quizzical,
maybe.
So a break clause is, so you might have a 2-year contract for your house, or you might have a year's contract for your house, and then there might be a 6-month break clause in, or a 2-year contract and there's like a 10-month or 12-month break clause. That is where basically the contract is split almost into 2 halves, where it's like, okay, you have to do that first bit, and if you decide to leave, you're liable for the rent. But once it gets to 6 months, if you've got a 6-month break clause, you can say to the landlord, hey, I'm actually decided to move out. The landlord can also do the same to you. So the landlord can say at the break clause,
kick you out,
hey, we're going, not kick you out, but we've decided to break the contract. So if you are a problem tenant, they could use the break clause to kind of move you out of the house in that, at that time. Break clauses are normally useful for tenants if you're like, well, I might, especially if you sign on to a longer contract. So like if you're on a 2-year contract, but you think, oh, I might actually move abroad next year, but I want to sign on to this kind of price for 2 years. Although sometimes at the break clause, they can raise the rent a little bit. It depends on the break clause. And there's lots more information about break clauses on the University of London Housing Advice website. But yeah, that's a really good point, Erik, and one that I had completely forgotten to mention. The other little bit of advice, places where you can get advice, particularly if you're not a current student. So if you're prospective and you don't have access to some of those UCL services just yet, Shelter is the UK's biggest kind of housing charity, and they have an advice line. And then Citizens Advice is a really, really great charity organisation that offers advice on everything from kind of housing to consumer issues to like your phone contract. They have advice on everything. It's not legal advice. They don't offer kind of specific legal advice, but they do have you can basically get the tools to advocate for yourself in the first instance before it gets to kind of actual proper legal stuff. So check those out. Another thing that you can do is check the landlord register and kind of scam awareness registers, and there's more advice there on the housing advice website. But double check, is your landlord listed as being dodgy?
Are they legit?
Hopefully. Guarantors, let's come back to those, because I imagine we've got listeners going, they said that word and I have no idea what it means. George, what's a guarantor?
So that's somebody that, for example, if you can't pay rent or if you miss a rent payment, they're liable to pay for I think, is it for the entire tenancy?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, it's basically like that. So like a full man, basically. And normally, so say if you're like a home student, it typically is like a guardian. So for example, mine's my mum. And yeah, but I think it's a bit different if you're an international student.
Yeah, I do know something about guarantor. So that person need to be a UK citizen, I think. And they need to have UK-based salaries, so they could pay for your rent. They don't have to be your family members, I think. They could be your, I don't know, friends, or I think there are actually companies doing that. But I'm not sure if that's legal.
Yeah, it's legal.
Yeah.
But using a company will normally come at a cost to you. Okay, so what is a guarantor? Just some clarity around guarantors. Normally, it would be someone that you know. So it might be George's mum, for example, or a guardian, or like a family friend. The guarantor is basically the person who agrees that they will pay your rent if you don't, for whatever reason. They normally have to be earning a set sort of amount. Sort of 3 times the rent is often the kind of the calculation, or they need to prove via bank statements that they've got enough in the bank in savings that they would be able to pay your rent if you weren't able to. There are companies that will offer a kind of guarantor service, or you can pay your rent via them. or they kind of back your rent, they come at a price. So do proceed with caution. Are there other options available to you? Like, is there someone else in the UK who you know who might be able to be your guarantor? Because generally speaking, students pay their rent. So the guarantor doesn't ever actually get used. One thing that is important to note as well is that UCL does have a guarantor scheme, and there are full details for that on the UCL Accommodation website. Not everybody's eligible for the scheme, but lots of students are. So check it out, and you do need to have your paperwork kind of ready in advance. So you have to be pretty much good to go when you're at your viewing and saying, yep, I'm going to sign on. By the way, it's the UCL guarantor scheme. But yes, it is quite normal for international students to be asked to pay 6 months rent up front or a year's rent up front. But well done, Erik, for negotiating down from 12 to 6 months. That is genuinely a great achievement.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's talk about moving in. What did you do with your stuff over the summer? Did you have any stuff?
So for me, I don't live in London. So I live like 3-hour drive away.
This is in holiday time,
Yeah.
not term time.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. But so like between first and second year. So when I was moving all of my stuff from halls, I then brought it back home. And then when we were moving into the flat, it then took, I think, like 2 cars to get all of my stuff to come out.
Wow, 2 cars?
I packed
That's a
too
lot.
much.
George, you are very lucky.
Yeah, it wasn't very smart of me, to be honest. But so we did that. And I think all of my flatmates moved in on different days, and we helped each other
Oh, that's
like
nice.
move in the stuff. And yeah, so because obviously I live in the UK, so lucky enough to be able to just store the stuff at home. I know there's like storage facilities that you can do, which I know like a lot of international students do, particularly.
Erik, what about you?
Yeah, like I said, I stayed in London for 3 months. So actually I need to moving into the first private house and then move in the second private house. So it's like a lot of moving. So first time I asked some of my friends to come over and help me with the move. And I also borrowed one of my friend's car.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, just one car.
Just one car.
Okay.
I can't believe you had 2 cars of stuff, George. That is wild.
Okay, one of them's
Was it
much
a very
smaller than the
small
other.
car?
Yeah,
Okay.
okay, that's why.
Asking friends for help is really common, or asking family for help. Some students do put stuff in storage. That is quite costly quite often. So again, like, consider, do you really need all this stuff? Maybe sell it at the end of the year. UCL's got a new app that's coming in called Huzzah, which you can use to sell stuff to other students, which is really, really great. But then also donating stuff to charity is an option, or just not having 2 cars worth of stuff to begin with, George. Then moving vans, I think that's probably less common for students to hire moving vans. You don't normally have that much stuff, but that is an option. Oh, Erik?
Yeah, I like my second move, like moving to the second private house. I actually ordered an Uber online, and like what is called Uber XL or Uber Extra, so like the big car. And because I really got a lot of stuffs that even though it's fit into one car, but it's a lot of stuffs. So I actually kind of, I don't know, give the driver a lot of tips, so they could actually help me with moving all the things into the car and moving all those luggages out of the car. So I would say, yeah, it's a bit tough. Yeah, but it's still an option.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then I think one of you mentioned an inventory check as being one of the things that happens when you first move in. What's an inventory check, George?
So basically, somebody comes in from the agency or even the landlord themselves, and they'll be taking photos before you put any of your stuff down, just to make sure they have a record of the current quality or condition. Condition's the word I was looking for. Of the furniture, for example, and see what's there to make sure that everything that you started the tenancy with is there until the end. And they can very much vary in terms of like how professional they are. So like, for instance, when we had our inventory check, I wasn't entirely sure who the guy was. We were like, oh, hello, because I'd never met the guy before. And they just said someone was coming round, and he just came in, took a few photos on his phone, and just shared them with the estate agents. But I think typically they're quite like, they're much more formal than that.
Yeah, there's often a clipboard involved. Something that is really important to do, and that everybody should do, is take your own photos. Yeah, Eric's smiling. It's so important that you get your own photos, so that when it comes to moving out, you can say, actually, there was dust here already. When I moved out of a flat once, so I moved in and arrived, and I was like, wow, they've put new carpets in, amazing. But there's dust everywhere, and some of the toilet was not exactly as clean as one would hope. And so I took a picture of it, and I didn't just keep the picture. The best thing to do with those photos is, if you've noticed stuff that's wrong when you first move in, send those in an email to the landlord and to the letting agent, so that they've got the record that you have gone, I've noticed this. When it comes to the end of tenancy, that's the sort of thing that can be really, really useful. Bills, we mentioned them earlier.
Yeah.
What bills do we need to think about? Who sets them up? How do we do it?
Well, firstly, of course, water, electricity, and for London, heating, and also council tax. But like, of course, students don't need to pay for council tax, but it's not like you automatically don't pay that. You need to go to the council website. So firstly, find out what the place you are living in, what's that called, and that's actually a lot of administration work. You have to sign up for this, sign up for that, send the council all your contracts and your student student evidence, like that, just to provide
your statement of student
statement
status.
of student, just to prove that you are actually a student of UCL.
It's a bit of an admin hassle, but it is really important to do. The other bills are normally a bit easier to set up. You normally get a letter that's got like a reference number, and then you're like, oh, okay, this account is for this property. The Wi-Fi is a fun one, because it's quite often a good idea to set that up or start setting it up before you actually move in, because you often have to wait for the install day, so that you're always kind of hotspotting for like a week, which is a little bit tricky. In terms of paying for the bills, does one person do all of it, or do you all do certain ones, and then how does that work?
Well, so in my scenario, so I manage like electricity and gas. And
well done, George.
I know, very mature of me. And I'm just making sure that the bills get paid for. So it comes out of my account via direct debit, and I make sure that my flatmates know their portion. So we just do it equally. We don't argue about who used say the heating more. And
I think that could get really tricky.
That's another point to mention, having discussions about who's using the heating much more than others, and do you then need to change up the contribution. But luckily that's not our case. And I will also bring up, in terms of bills and paying for them as well, you can get, I think, Thames Water, they can give you student discount if you, or it's to do with, maybe not student discount, but it's if you prove that you earn below a certain level. So because you're a student, you're going to be below that threshold. You can then show them proof of your bank statements, and then you can get a reduction.
Nifty.
Yeah, look into that on Thames Water. I
didn't know that one.
Yeah, I don't know that as well.
I think it's I'm not sure how much, 25, 50. It's quite good though. It can help a lot.
Audience, make sure you check that out. So George, I think you do it probably the way that most students end up doing it, where one person does a couple of the bills, and then other students do a couple of the other bills. In terms of splitting out money and who owes what, there's an app called Splitwise, which I would really recommend everybody goes and uses. You can do everything. It's great for holidays. If one person buys flights, one person pays for the Airbnb, but it's really good for household expenses, and you could put your bills on there if you want to keep it simple, or if you share things like food and drink, or even if you're just sharing milk, rather than it just being kind of up in the air, who owes what. You can record everything on Splitwise and it'll like divvy it out for you. Great app. Then I think that's mostly the stuff on like bills and moving in. So we're all happy. We've moved into our flat together. What happens if there are any like maintenance issues or if stuff breaks? What do you do?
Well, normally the estate agent will give you the contact, or at least you can contact them and ask what's the appropriate email address or how do we address any maintenance issues in the flat. And you want to do it like ASAP. And you take photos, even videos, give detailed explanations.
What about the stuff that comes up throughout the tenancy? So we've been living there for like 3 months at this point. What if there's something broken? What do I do?
Well, I'd say similar thing.
Yeah.
We've had like a very bad like plumbing issue recently.
Have you reported it to your lettings agent in writing, George?
Yeah, yes,
Yeah,
we
nice.
did. And I think there's certain things where they really have to act on. So plumbing, for instance, can be a really serious issue because it's literally can be a health hazard sometimes, which it wasn't our case.
I don't want to know.
No, you don't need to know.
Yeah, there's some smaller stuff might take like a week or two to get fixed or a few days, and then other things so if your water gets shut off, for example, for more than 24 hours, they start being liable for kind of your rent. So that normally gets fixed ASAP.
I think you need to make sure to actually tell your agent how important that would be and how would that affect in your life, and kind of push them a little bit.
Yeah, there's a key word here, and it's chase.
Yeah.
If you're not getting a response from your agents, lots of agents are really, really great, and actually they will fix stuff really quickly. There are some that don't, and you got to chase until it gets done. And again, it's admin, but it's better to do the chasing than to have like a broken oven or sort of weird plumbing issues like you've got, George. Don't really want to know. Problem neighbours or sort of bigger issues, or if anything, if it's not getting resolved via your letting agent, there are resources that can help. So we've mentioned the SU advice service already. We've mentioned University of London housing advice. They don't just do contract checking, they can also help out with problems that you experience during your tenancy. So what's moving out like?
Well, I mean, I haven't actually officially done it, but I've know many people that have, and it can be quite difficult because when you're moving out, the landlord or the estate agents are going to probably be doing viewings at the same time as well. So when you're leading up to preparing to move out of your property, you're going to have probably times where people are coming in to view it, and that's a hassle in itself. You need to make sure the property is clean enough or somebody is at the flat.
Yeah, they will be giving 24 hours notice.
Yeah,
that's a really important point. Legally, they have to.
Yeah.
So you have time to get out of your pajamas.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's a really good point. There might be viewings happening. Hopefully not loads and loads. Hopefully it's only like 3 or 4. And then someone goes, "Oh, what a wonderful property. I'll take it off your hands." Then when you actually get to kind of leaving, we've already mentioned the professional clean.
Yeah.
So it might be listed in your contract that either the flat needs to be kind of clean to a particular standard, or that you have to have a professional clean come in. I've done the like professional clean myself in the past, not professional, but I've done the like, I'm going to clean to X standard. It does take a really long time. Like we're talking days. Particularly if you've not kept on top of the cleanliness throughout your tenancy. Sometimes going for a professional clean is like almost the easier option, and you're more potentially likely to get your deposit back if you do it that way. Erik, have you experienced that previously or not?
I think previously it's just actually we don't need to hire professional cleaning, but I think this flat, the flat I'm currently living in, you actually need to purchase a kind of professional cleaning. I'm not actually sure if that's gonna be a list of some companies from the landlord, but I think that's possible.
Yeah, they might do. They sometimes have like a particular company that they use, and they just charge you the fee. I think it's normally in the region of like £150, but it depends on the size of your house or flat. and then you like break it out between you, so it might be 50, 60 pounds per person. So it's not nothing, but it's not like whoa amounts of money. But yeah, we've also mentioned the old pushing back if there's issues. So if the landlord tries to keep your deposit and goes, you have done this, 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 and this wrong, that's not set in stone. You have the power of a strongly worded email. A polite but firm email can sometimes be the difference between you not getting your deposit back and you getting your deposit back. So keep those receipts, take photos of everything, keep in touch with your letting agent, even though it's a bit of an admin hassle. Be a good tenant. That's a really important one, especially if you're looking to sign on again. So George, I imagine you were a perfect tenant in your first year. So they were like, yep, we'll keep you. Because it is less hassle than moving. I have got a few final questions, just some quick fire ones, on the like studenty side of things and on the very UCL side of things. We've already talked about like advice on whereabouts to live. So we mentioned kind of that centrally North London bit. Any other thoughts on where you might live?
I think also, although you're going to be living with probably your main friends, maybe think about where other people are living. So if you want to be near them, see if they're having any success in that area. And yeah, like tube lines we mentioned. So like Northern Line, for example, or like Victoria Line will get you into like UCL Bloomsbury, or say like Stratford. I mean, Stratford literally has loads of tube lines. So if you go anywhere, you'll probably find a way to get yourself to UCL East.
Yeah.
But yeah, things
and
like
buses as well. Don't forget the buses. So have a look at the numbers that go to campus, and particularly if you're going into your second year, you might know where on campus you tend to be, and you can look at it's better to arrive on this bus if I'm coming to this end of campus versus that bus. That's a good way of doing it. Erik, any thoughts on locations?
Actually, I have a tip from one of my friends. It's actually, I think it sounds cool. So, you guys know Thameslink, right?
Oh yeah,
the kind of train. And as far as I know, there are a lot of trains going on in the Thameslink line, and I mean very often, very frequent, and pretty quickly. So you can actually follow some lines, just like Thameslink or any other lines, to find out the places that you could actually get access to the public transportation. And that's one of the way if you want to use the public transportation and get to the campus. It's also a good way to control the rent price, because in the central London usually the rent is high, and if you a little bit far away from UCL and the central London, it will be better.
It's a good point. We don't often talk about like big proper trains. No offense to the tube. You are proper trains too. Yeah, things like the Thameslink, they are options if you wanted to live a bit further out. Something to consider, the trains sometimes have different prices to the tube and things, so worth double checking. But yeah, it's an option, definitely. Good point, Erik. Flatmate drama? What's the like smallest, most petty thing that you've fallen out over?
Toilet roll. Like definitely toilet roll. I think it's when you're like on your last one and then it's like, oh, who's going to buy it now? And often like we've even had arguments about what toilet roll we buy.
So it's a big topic of conversation.
Yeah. So I'm all for investing in good quality toilet roll. Some of my flatmates don't. So that as well, away from just toilet roll, just in terms of toiletries as well, what you like to buy, that could be a point of argument.
If you're going to share,
because that's what we do in my flat, so I should make that clearer. We share like toiletries and stuff.
Nice. Like this is why it's come up so much in this podcast.
Yeah. Plumbing.
What about you, Erik? Falling out with people over anything?
I think cleaning probably. So we need to clean the bathrooms. We shared, and the kitchen as well, because like 4 of us share the same kitchen, so you need to make sure that you clean after your mess. And also it's the same for bathroom. I think the bathroom is actually a little bit more nasty because, you know, long hair.
Do you have to pick it out of the plug
Yeah.
hole? Yeah. How do you guys, how do you approach any sort of flat issues or potential, hopefully you're avoiding any drama, but how would you approach it?
I think what we've hopefully said throughout this talk is communication is key, because you can't come at it from, I think whenever you address it, you have to make sure that you're calm and technically, I mean, you're kind of an adult at this point. If you're renting your own property, you're living away from guardians or parents, and you have to be sensible and mature and talk about it like adults. Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Erik, any other thoughts?
I agree with that as well. Also, be patient with your roommates. It's very often you need to understand that nobody is like identical, so they of course have different thoughts and different lifestyles. So just I would say be open-minded a little bit.
Yeah.
That's really good advice.
Yeah. And to add to that, like, the flatmates are not out to get you. Like you said, you just need to think like what they might be thinking, why they did what they did, know about their habits, and don't let that wind you up. Because at the end of the day, you're living with each other for a reason, because you get on well. So you should be open-minded of all your different qualities.
Oh, great points, guys.
Yeah.
Okay, last thing.
Mhm.
What's your biggest piece of advice to those who are embarking on their private housing journey?
Don't be put off by like getting set back, or you might literally have a perfect flat you find and you might easily secure it and you might be super excited, but like sadly that's not always the case. So it's really important to be resilient and say if that estate agent doesn't contact you when you call them, or when they tell you they're going to call you, I mean, you need to be like on it. You need to make sure that it's your property, so you need to make it your own. You need to be making sure that you're in charge and you're going to secure it. Yeah.
Nice. Erik?
I would say be careful and be considerate. So firstly, you are about to decide where you're going to live for 1 year or even more. So just be careful. You don't want to like feel very excited at one moment, heat of moment, and then regret it. And also be considerate. Think and think. Just the best advice I could give.
I think
Be
that's great
careful.
advice.
That duality of advice.
I love that. Yeah, be
Strong.
bold but careful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's about the best advice that you could give to our lovely audience. So thank you both so much for coming on and talking with me today. I hope everybody who's listening or watching has enjoyed. And if you need any further advice or sort of specific advice, we're going to have a slide that has a list of some kind of helpful links for you. Check out the UCL Accommodation website, the Alternative Accommodation for Students page. And yeah, best of luck with your search.